So far in TBC Classic, we have done quite a lot. We've leveled the Druid all the way up to level 70, got full pre-base gear, and took her into our first ever TBC raid. We've even started leveling up our second character. But not long ago, Blizzard did the unthinkable. They actually announced Phase 2, and that's why I'm making this video, because I don't really want to still be making Phase 1 videos when Phase 2 is out. So starting the day off, we're actually going straight into Karazhan. Truth be told, I was actually supposed to put these raids into the last Druid video, but just ended up not. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the reason I wanted to show you this raid specifically was because we did manage to get some very spicy loot. And whilst we were talking about loot, soft reserves. Firstly, Skulker's Greaves. These legs are so unbelievably good. They aren't just base for Phase 1, they are also base for Phase 2 and are still pretty damn solid in Phase 3. Secondly, the Edgewalker Long Boots. Again, these are base for us not only in Phase 1, but also in Phase 2 and are second base in Phase 3. Thirdly, the Drape of the Dark Reavers. Same story really, it's base all of the way until Phase 3. Now obviously, there is a lot of other stuff that we could be looking for inside of Karazhan, but these are like the big three. Now, as many of you know, towards the end of vanilla, I have become a bit of a parsing fiend, and I was able to get rank 1 feral in AQ 40. Now don't get me wrong, I do like just chilling out and questing. It's one of my favourite things to do in this game, but I also enjoy doing the min-maxing and big endgame stuff, and my goal with this character currently is to get rank 1 in Karazhan. Will I actually be able to do that? Probably not. And at the time of recording this, it was only the second week of Karazhan. And what we were doing for Nether Spite was rotating people on the blue beam, just so that everyone could get their 99. And well, this week was my turn. And I can't lie, I had zero idea what that actually meant. I was just told stand in the blue beam until the boss dies. I never realized that meant I was going to be able to get up to 4k damage. And unsurprisingly, this was indeed my second 100 parse of TBC. But not only that, Nether Spite did in fact drop the Skulker's Greaves, which I would say is probably our biggest piece of gear in the entire phase. So we do chess events and move on to Prince Malchezaar. Nothing massively interesting happened, no big parses or anything. Although we did actually wipe on our first attempt at him. But who cares about all that, right? The loot is the most exciting part. So Skulker's Greaves were called to roll, and I managed to get a huge 95 roll, beating the other two players. I know, isn't that crazy? Me getting loot. Can you believe it? But genuinely, this is a huge upgrade. This is going to make gearing in Phase 2 way more comfortable. We also went and did the part of the Nightbane questline, which I wasn't on. But fast forward a week and we were of course back in Karazhan. Our soft reserves were actually the exact same, except since now that we have Skulkers, we have now replaced them with the Gorona's Signet Ring. Because currently, I wasn't hit capped, and the ring would definitely help us get caught up on that. So we kill Attunement the Huntsman and move on to doing Morose. Now, funny thing about Morose, this was, at least for me, an extremely hard boss to parse well on. Because of all the ads, it makes it pretty difficult to actually see what direction Morose is actually facing, and because of his gouge mechanic, 9 times out of 10, I would be second on the threat meter. So when the tank gets gouged, he would automatically go to me, and then I get one shot. Now luckily this time that didn't happen, although I still didn't manage to get a big parse, but he did end up dropping the Edgewalker Long Boots. How exciting. As for the rest of the raid, it was pretty standard. I managed to get a good couple of 99s here and there, and that's also another thing that I really like about parsing. It's a great way to see yourself improve as the weeks go on. But who cares, right? We're all about the loot. And well, I did manage to get an 89 roll. I mean, this is unheard for me. 2 weeks in a row that I got loot. Had my curse finally been lifted? Well, the short answer is no. So a nice couple of raids to start us off. But now it's time to start working on something else now, and that is getting Exalted with the Aldor. Because at Exalted, we are able to purchase ourselves the Greater Inscription of Vengeance. Now it's not actually our best in slot shoulder enchant, the ones from Saffron are. but is it really worth the hassle for such a tiny upgrade? And honestly, good luck finding an axe group. And well, yes, I did attempt to do some world farming and quests and stuff, but to be honest, I really hate rep farming. So good thing I'm financially irresponsible, because I went and spent over 1,000 gold on just buying my way to Exalted. Was it worth it for one enchant that I didn't even immediately use? Probably not. But on the topic of enchantments, like I said in one of the prior Druid videos, I am currently an enchanter, so that I can get myself the ring enchants. So I ran all the way back to Karazhan and visited the ethereal NPC that stands right before Netherspite and purchased myself the recipe. Now the reason that I actually hadn't done this yet was because in order to craft the enchant, you need a runed adamantite rod. And at first, I thought we needed 8 primal mites to craft one, which would have been another 1,000 gold that I just didn't really want to spend. Yeah, well, my stupid ass eventually realized it was actually only the one that we needed. But the random grinds don't end quite there. If you have watched the last Druid video, then you will know that I mentioned the only piece of gear that we still needed to upgrade was our neck piece. And well, if you can get yourself to Exalted with the Consortium, then you can purchase the Haramad's Bargain. And okay, sure, it doesn't get us any more hit that we desperately needed, but even if we do get Worgen Claw Necklace, we can still use this one in a 6% hit set. And like I said before, I really hate rep grinding. So of course, I just decided to buy myself up to Exalted with this one too. This was a very expensive day. This one was a bit different though, because instead of just handing something in, we actually use these prison keys that you get from daily quests in Netherstorm. You open a prison cell and a random mob jumps out of it. Kill it and you are guaranteed at least a green BOE and a prisoner ID tag, which can then be turned in for some rep. And to be honest, this one wasn't actually that bad, since it's at least somewhat interesting. Plus, just look at all of those BOEs we were getting, which was extremely satisfying to disenchant. But after like an hour and 1,500 gold later, I was eventually able to get us our brand new neck piece. So now that that garbage is out of the way, we are actually heading down for a run of heroic slave pens. Now obviously, at this point we aren't after any loot or anything, apart from maybe some badges of justice, because you can never have too many of those. But what we are here for is the Serpent Shrine Cavern Attunement quest, which yes, is a phase 2 raid. And is it maybe a little bit early for that? Well, no. Okay, maybe a little. I just like being prepared, that's all. But for the first step in the attunement process, we have to visit an NPC inside of the slave pens on heroic difficulty, who then gives us a quest to pick up 2 different signets from both Gruul and Magtheridon, which we're going to do anyway, right? So whilst I was honed in on doing attunements, I decided to get to work on the other phase 2 attunement for the raid The Eye, or Tempest Keep as it's more commonly known. And this one is ridiculously long. I mean, look at this list. We have to do every single one of these in order to simply enter the raid. And apparently, I have completed a couple of the first quests in the chain. Don't remember doing that, but I won't complain. So I made my way over to Shadowmoon Valley to continue the quest chain where I had apparently left off. And the first quest did actually offer some pretty interesting quest rewards. It was a bunch of different food buff items. And sure, it's not a huge deal or anything, but it's free and definitely helps out since my entire raiding budget for this phase is about 15 gold. The quest itself was actually a pretty unique one. We had to use a whistle whilst being near the tubers, and if there was a nearby hellbore, it would come over and dig it up for us. So I handed that in and claimed my free stack of food buffs and got to work on the next quest. Now as far as it goes, you guys know that I'm not the greatest at reading quest text or anything, but when it comes to the big quest chains, like attunement ones, I do actually really like to read them. By far my favourite quest chain was the Onyxia attunement one, so there's no reason for me to not like this one too, right? Which is true, this was a really cool quest chain. Oronok talks about how he was once once a lieutenant of Gul'dan, and Gul'dan used a corrupted tome to sever the elemental bonds that the Draenor orcs once had. But after Illidan took over the Black Temple, he found it and he split it into 3 fragments. And Oronok sent his 3 boys to find the fragments. And of course, now it's our job to find Oronok's 3 boys and recover the Cipher of Damnation. I think that's what's happening anyway. At the very least, I think I'm on the right track. The first of his boys is Grom Tor, who tells us that the first fragment is located in a chest at Coilscar Point. So of course, it's our job to go and find it by slaying the nearby Naga and praying that we loot one of the keys. We then use the keys that we find to open up a bunch of chests and once again pray that the quest item is inside. Unfortunately, this wasn't a guaranteed drop sort of thing, but it wasn't all that difficult and took us only exactly 7 minutes to complete. The second of Oronok's sons is Artor, who unfortunately seems to be a little bit dead. Of course, the right thing for us to do in this situation is return his corpse to his father. So I ran over and picked up the key from this succubus and set Artor's body free, which causes his spirit to linger, because he says he cannot leave until we have recovered the second part of the Cipher of Damnation. So off we go, hand in hand, to slay a giant tentacle eye called Veneratus the Many, who drops us the second part of the Cipher of Damnation. That then of course causes Artor's spirit to be free, and he tells us that we should inform his father of his passing and that Artor sees the glorious hunting grounds and he waits for him there. What a touching story. The third son is called Borak. Now the other 2 mini quest chains all seem to be pretty straightforward. However, the third one was definitely the most in-depth out of all of them. We first had to set down a bundle of blood thistle, which if I'm not mistaken is basically just Blood Elf crack, which we are using to basically distract Envoy Ikaris so that we can kill him and take the Storm Rage missive. Next, what we had to do was kill a load of the Eclipsing Blood Elves in order to acquire some of their armor so that Borak could create us a disguise. We then used that disguise to infiltrate Eclipse Point and talk with Grand Commander Rusk. We ask him to move this cipher to Zulahead. He then gets pissed off because we don't have a missive to give him. We then threaten him, and then he agrees. Basically the same as any interaction you'll have in a UK pub. So I return to Borak, who now tells us we have to ambush them as they are transporting the cipher. However, this is now an elite quest. So I teamed up with a couple of nearby players to take it down. We did luckily have a tank and a healer, which is all we really needed to successfully take it down. We then all returned to Oronok, who gave us this very, very nice piece of gear, the Umber Howl's Collar, which is not only pre-base for bear tanking, but is still pretty decent, even next to all of the raid loot. But with the Cipher of Damnation now once again whole, we have to take it to the Altar of Damnation and read the words, which summons the boss Cyrock. And even just looking at the amount of health this guy had, I honestly wasn't 100% sure if we were going to be able to kill it. And to make it just that little bit worse, we still only had 4 players. But we decided to just engage it anyway, and whatever happened, happened. And it was going fine until a random Horde Druid decided to ruin it for us by attacking me. But I respawned and the group had luckily managed to keep him engaged. So with me as a tank and a fresh Innervate on the healer, we were eventually successful as a group of 4. And that was it. We were finally done with the Cipher of Damnation quest chain. Now the next part of the attunement would unfortunately require us to do a bunch of different heroic dungeons, which is something that we will worry about later. Because for now, it is time for us to head back into Karazhan. So, soft reserves. Of course, now that we have both Skulker's Greaves and Edgewalker Longboots, my weekly reserves are now Garona's Signet Ring, Drape of the Dark Reavers, and also the Gloves of Dexterous Manipulation. Yes, I know, some of you might be thinking that the Grips of Deafness are superior, but I'm here to tell you that they are in fact not. Now don't get me wrong, Expertise is an incredibly good stat, but for us, it's kinda just not, because we auto attack every second and it's just too fast for us to really care. Now this raid in particular was kind of an interesting one, because I believe that this raid was the first time that I had ever killed Nightbane. Not gonna lie though, he's an incredibly annoying boss to fight. He's constantly flying around above us and spawning skeletons to attack us. As for his loot, there is absolutely nothing we could possibly need from him, so he's nothing but a another parse for us. So we just clear through the raid like every other week until we are at the boss Terestian Illhoof. This is probably my favourite fight so far, to be honest. Not only is it a cleave fight, but when his little imp companion dies, he makes Illhoof take 25% additional damage, which can make the damage numbers go ever so slightly insane. This kill specifically though was a pretty bad parse for me as far as it goes, but he did end up dropping the Terestian Strangle Staff, which is our best in slot weapon for the entire phase. Now of course I didn't soft reserve it, because we are the only druid in the raid and we are guaranteed to be past it. Now like I mentioned at the start, I am a bit of a parsing fiend, and my goal is to be rank 1 in every current raid, and so far it's not going too bad. I think after this specific raid I did actually manage to get rank 2 Feral in Karazhan. Didn't hold it for very long, but for the most part I've been able to stay at least top 5. And that kind of brings me to my next point. I've had quite a few people now kind of question why my logs are so good, and truth be told, I know that I suck at this game on almost every level. However, the one thing that I am good at for some reason is Feral Druid, specifically cat spec, because I also suck at bear tanking. And a couple people have asked if I could make like a Feral Druid guide. I don't know if that's something you guys would be interested in, but if it is, let me know. So with another weekly raid cleared, it was time to get back to the Tempest Keep Attunement, and the next steps would involve completing 3 Trial of the Naru quests, which means we have to take down 4 different heroic dungeons. The Shadow Labyrinth, which is apparently quite an easy one, the Steam Vault, which is also quite easy, the Shattered Halls, which will definitely be interesting to do on a Feral Druid, and the Arcatraz, which I believe is the hardest heroic dungeon in the entire game. However, currently, I wasn't attuned for the Shattar Heroics or Honor Hold dungeons, so I decided to first get to work on the Shattar rep inside of the dungeon, the Botanica. Now luckily this was only going to take us a couple of hours to get done, because I had managed to rack up quite a solid amount of rep whilst we were farming out the Tunic of Assassination inside of the Mechanar. As for the loot inside here, of course, we do not need anything, because we are far too cool for that. We are here purely because of the rep. And as a whole, I do actually quite enjoy the Botanica. I really like the whole vibe of it. The Sunstrider Blood Elves, I believe, took this place from the Naru and are using it to study and manipulate Outland's flora for arcane power. Pretty cool stuff. It's also not massively difficult. We are able to just turn the brain off and power through it. I do, however, hope that at some point in the future we can do this dungeon as a warlock or something, because there's a lot of really big packs, and I just think seeing a Seed of Corruption explode here would be awesome. It's a fun and pretty chill dungeon to do, and like I said earlier, we really didn't have that much rep left to get, and fast forward 4 or 5 runs, we had managed to reach Revered with the Shattar. So I rushed back to Shatrath and visited the NPC Almador, and we are now attuned for the Shattar Heroics. And for the last heroic rep grind that we still needed to do was Honor Hold. And the most efficient way for us to do that would be inside of the dungeon, the Shattered Halls. But unlike the Shattar, I hadn't really gotten any more reps since we had hit Honored whilst leveling. So I ended up having to do like 10 to 12 runs before we had hit Revered. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a good day's worth of grinding. Mainly because finding a group as a feral for this dungeon was an absolute nightmare, because 90% of the pools in this dungeon were massive AoE packs where the mobs fell over almost instantly. The bosses were pretty good though. I was able to just sit back and pump DPS into them. I really can't lie though, this dungeon does start to wear on you a bit after 10 hours, and I think that's because the aesthetic is pretty consistent throughout the entire dungeon, and by that I mean everything in the dungeon looks the same. It's not that bad though, it at the very least kept me busy for a day. But with that grind now completed, that means we are now attuned for every single heroic dungeon in the entire game. So with us now being attuned for every dungeon in the game, it is time for us to start clearing these Trial of the Naru quests. And first stop is Heroic Steam Vaults. Now like I said earlier, this one is quite an easy heroic as far as they go. The mobs basically just have more health and sometimes smack for quite a bit more. However, our group composition was very questionable. We had an LA Shaman, a Boomkin, a Cat, and a Prot Warrior. I mean, who needs crowd control, right? So we get 2 and kill the first boss, Hydromancer Thespia, who dropped us the Moonrage Girdle and a Badge of Justice. And just like every other heroic dungeon, our goal was to skip as many mobs as possible. So using the water walking ability that the shaman has, we ran through the water tunnels to skip quite a big chunk of the mobs. And not too long after, we were on to and fighting the second boss, which surprisingly went quite well. I thought this one might actually give us a little bit of issues, since he likes to constantly spawn adds in to attack us. For his loot, he dropped a relatively decent looking gun. The following trash mobs, which I also thought would give us at least some kind of issue, were completely fine. And the final boss, Warlord Karazhan, again, really wasn't an issue, especially since our group was mostly entirely single target DPS. And for the loot, he did drop an array of pretty nice looking gear, but with Karazhan now dead, we had completed the first part of the Trial of the Naru. But in amongst all of the rep grinding and attunement chaos, it was once again time to raid. And by the way, I was also doing Gruul plus Magtheridon every week, but I was getting zero loot and not particularly good parses, so I'm not including them. For the soft reserves, we are still on gloves, cloak, and the ring. Now, the one thing that I had been struggling with for some reason was parsing on the first 3 bosses. No matter what I did, something seemed to just always go wrong. Like on this maiden kill, where I literally ended up tanking her in cat form. I did, however, manage to get a decent parse this week on Alehoof, 2.3k damage. It's not great, but it's not bad. Still an improvement for sure. Shade of Iran, on the other hand, went fantastically. He was, I believe, the only boss that I still needed a 99 on, and I managed to get it to 2.2k DPS, which at the time of recording was a top 5 parse. But more excitingly than that, Drape of the Dark Reavers finally dropped, and there was only myself and the rogue who had a soft reserve on it. So we clear up Nether Spite, boring stuff since we weren't allowed on the blue beam this week, and moved on to doing Prince Malchezaar. Now, the thing about parsing on this boss is that it does have quite a big RNG factor to it, and that's because of the Enfeeble mechanic, which basically takes 5 random players' health down to 1, and if you were hit by his Shadow Nova ability, you instantly die. So if you get Enfeeble, you have to LOS the Shadow Nova, which means you aren't on the boss 100% of the time, which means you get a far lower parse. And while in this raid, I got insanely lucky, because I only had to do the first Enfeeble, and then I was free to just smack the boss until I couldn't no more. And this was indeed a 100 parse. So even if we lost the roll on the cloak, we did manage to get ourselves some pretty solid parses. And joke's on you, we already rolled it out down at Nether Spite. I am so sorry for Minori. I did also get past the Grips of Deafness in this raid, since no one else wanted them, and they are very close to being bis for us. So with one more weekly raid now completed and our gear now looking pretty damn good, it was once again time to head back to doing the Attunement quest. And this time, we are going for the big one, Heroic Arcatraz. Going into this one, I knew that this was going to be difficult. You really do need a coordinated group to be able to clear this efficiently, and that's why I have assembled a team of my most powerful allies. Mustard Soup, rank 1 Ret Paladin in Vanilla, he is here to carry me towards my attunement. Cool Cat, he may be known for meowing in general chat, but this man is also a fully best out meat wall of a tank. Setha, one of our raid leaders, this guy knows just about everything there is to know about WoW Classic. And Worf. Not sure who Worf is, but his name is probably a slur in some language. Now, as far as it goes, the trash in this instance wasn't actually that bad. A few of the packs were aids, but as a whole, not too bad. The real killer of this dungeon is the first boss, Zeraketh the Unbound. The damage from this guy is so much that I literally brought about 30 shadow protection potions for everyone. And even with them, our first attempt, we weren't even close. But we were determined to get this done. But sadly, the second attempt was the exact same story. If I recall, it was down to something to do with the healer, and that he just needed to focus on healing the tank instead of trying to keep everyone alive. Our third attempt, we still didn't manage to get it down, but we were so incredibly close. So we gave it a fourth attempt, and our healer sadly died very early. But for some reason, no one was taking any damage. and we were successful at taking it down. Now luckily that's kinda it for heroic Arcatraz. The first boss is the hardest by a mile. That's not to say everything went perfectly though. We did have a time where we pulled 2 packs of mobs at once, and in this dungeon that is a massive no. And we did still have to be careful on the bosses, like with Delia the Doomsayer. When she was spinning around with her whirlwind ability, you really cannot take more than 1 hit before you die. And on Rathscryer Sarcothrates, the only real thing we had to pay attention to was not standing in the fire, which granted for classic players is pretty difficult. And to be honest, I don't even know how I died. Not the fire, surely. I was nowhere near it. Things were also getting a little bit scary on the fire elementals before the last boss, but eventually we did make it to Harbinger Skyrus. And apparently we managed to get a very easy set of bosses. Now I know I said all we actually had to do was kill the last boss, but actually the quest says we have to clear it whilst Millhouse Manastorm is still alive. Not sure how that works, but I don't think we actually did anything different and we still managed to get the quest completed. I still think it's funny how the last boss was the easiest one, but with the Arcatraz now completed, that means we have completed the first of the 3 trials of the Naru. Next up on the list of the trials is Heroic Shattered Halls. Now I knew that going into this one it was going to be a little bit weird for me, because this dungeon is the AoE dungeon. Every pack is huge with a minimum of like 7 mobs, and well, as a cat DPS we don't do any AoE at all, except sometimes being able to use Hurricane. So our group composition was literally Spell Cleave featuring cat. And I know sometimes you guys like to say I'm getting carried. Well, this time I will admit it, I was carried. I was still pumping on bosses though, that's something, right? I did however need to learn my lesson about Frost Novas though, because I kept forgetting that every time the mage would use Frost Nova, that the mobs would instantly start attacking me since I was the only person in melee range. But you know what? It really wasn't that bad. The mage and the warlock definitely had their heads screwed on, and I was able to show off against the bosses. But as a whole, the dungeon really didn't feel that much harder than normal. I mean, sure, everything had more health and hit a little bit harder, but other than that, it felt mostly the same. I mean, if we came in with a physical composition, it might be a different story. The loot was also pretty damn insane. Not only did Mustard get his boots, but he also got his trinket, plus Beast Lords, which sadly will just be disenchanted. But that also means we have completed the second trial of the Naru. So although we are almost done with the attunement, first we had to head into our first Gruul mag of the video, which means something interesting must have happened, right? So before we get to the bosses, let's quickly talk loot. Now there actually isn't a whole lot of stuff for us, but the few things that there is are very, very important. Of course, Dragonspine Trophy, which we won't ever get. Also the ring from the Magtheridon head quest. But for this raid, and basically every other raid I've done since TBC came out, I have soft reserved the Druid tier shoulders and chest. These are so good. These are not only the best stat wise, but they also have the set ability stapled to it, which lets us generate a bit more energy occasionally. As for the parsing, I can't lie, parsing on Gruul Mag has been pretty damn rough. Especially with this boss, High King Mulgar. No matter what I do, something always seemed to go wrong on this guy. Fairy Fire gets resisted, Mangled misses, or I just get feared to another dimension. But luckily for his loot, he does end up dropping our tier token. Onto Gruul himself now. Parsing on this boss is incredibly difficult. My parses aren't bad on him by any means, but this is a really long fight. And in order to parse on him efficiently, our group really needs to be optimized. And well, if you look at the kill times compared to the top 5, there is definitely quite a big gap. Also, since TBC has came out, DST has been HR'd for 1 person, and well, we haven't seen a single drop, like at all, and we run 2 IDs per week, and this week was no different. But moving on over to Magtheridon now, this boss is even harder to parse on, and that's because of the cubes. There is a mechanic on this guy that will make him deal massive raid-wide damage, and the way to stop it is by having 5 players click on the cubes, and when they do, Magtheridon gets a debuff which makes him take, I think, 200% additional damage. And what the top guilds do is they just rotate 15 players to keep the debuff up at all times and cut the kill time by like 70%. But we are nothing more than a pug guild. We set up some IDs and people can join if they want. So making that many randoms coordinate something like that, you can imagine is pretty damn hard. But very luckily, Magtheridon also dropped the other tier token that we needed. But on to the exciting part now, the loot. So first up, the shoulders. I managed to roll a 50. Not bad, but I unfortunately lost the roll to Setha. But very unexpectedly, he decided to trade me the shoulders. This was a very kind thing for him to do. He really didn't have to do that. So, thank you very much, Setha. I will put it to good use. But then the chest piece gets called to roll, and I roll a 34, losing to Setha. But he then decided to trade me the chest as well. I guess my man just doesn't need any loot. But seriously, it was very kind of him. And I never expect loot or anything from anyone, but you know, how can I resist? So what do you think? Suits me, right? So with another raid cleared, it is time for us to get this attunement finished once and for all. And our last stop is Heroic Shadow Labyrinth. To be honest, I am really sick of this dungeon at this point. After grinding to Exalted with the lower city in this place, I've never seen it the same. Luckily, this one really isn't that bad for a heroic dungeon. It felt very much the same as Shattered Halls, as in they don't really do much apart from having more health and doing a bit more damage. So we cleared up 2 and killed the first boss with 0 issues, but at the trash after the first boss, that's when things really started to crumble apart. The trash here is easily the hardest part of the dungeon. The Shadow Priests need to be CC'd, plus the heals need to be interrupted. Otherwise, it's just an absolute mess. And we just couldn't seem to crack this. We wiped close to 8 times on just this trash alone, and I'm still not sure as to why, because it really didn't feel any different than the normal version. And to make things just that little bit worse, the mage was clearly having some connection issues, and the warlock then decided just to dip mid-run. But we did luckily manage to replace him with this absolutely insane geared rogue, and he must have been our savior, because once he was here, things started to go a hell of a lot smoother, and we finally made it to the first boss after being in the dungeon for over an hour already. Now this boss is easily one of the most annoying bosses in the entire game. He's constantly charging around, he's threat resetting, he has a knockback, plus he has this really annoying ability where he mind controls everyone and makes us attack each other. The rogue blinded me, which caused the boss to charge me and instantly killed me. But of course, the boys were able to finish him off, and he dropped the Cloak of the Inciter, which, if I'm not mistaken, is actually pre-base for quite a few melee classes. The rest of the run went fine. I think that's the most positive way I can say it, but we did end up losing the mage again and stood AFK for like 15 minutes and then wiped on the trash because we pulled the boss at the same time. I'm genuinely not even sure why this run took us as long as it did, because it did not feel like it was overpowered or anything. But 2 hours later, we had finally managed to get Murmur down. Don't even think the Arcatraz took us that long. But with that now done, we had completed all 3 of the trials of the Naru and were now fully attuned for Tempest Keep. So with our attunement now completed, let's clear up my raw footage folder. So back to Karazhan we go. Nothing massive in this one, but I think we did manage to upgrade a couple of the parses, especially on Netherspite, because it was finally back to being my turn on the blue beam. It's honestly so nerve-wracking, knowing that I had to be the one to pump. My damage here is supposed to be like 3 times the rest of the group, and yeah, it went alright. I definitely think that there was a lot to improve on rotation-wise, but again, I think it's just so nerve-wracking, and there's so much pressure knowing that I wouldn't be able to be on the blue beam again for at least a month. But I did manage to get it all the way up to 4.5k DPS, which at the time I believe was 3rd. So not the best, but no complaints. So moving on now to some more Gruul / Magtheridon. Unfortunately, Mulgar Parse Curse is still in full force, because basically right as we pulled, Tyan popped Recklessness and got one shot, quickly followed by me. And unfortunately, Gruul did not go as planned either, because of his mechanic that makes him slap whoever is second on threat, which sadly was me. As for the loot, DST is obviously still HR'd, and we already have the tier pieces we needed, which means the only other thing that we need now is Magtheridon's head. It's got no hit, but as it stands now, we are actually overcapped. on hit. So there's no reason to really be chasing Garona's Signet Ring, which would just give us even more hit. So we get Magtheridon down, and would you believe it, the head actually dropped. And I managed to get a massive 98 roll, but so did the other feral that was with us. So of course, we had to roll again, and with an 84 roll, we managed to claim the head. And just like usual, I wasted no time and rushed over to Honor Hold to hand the head in. And just like that, we had managed to get ourselves full Phase 1 bis. As for the parsing, well, as I am writing this, I am sitting at rank 4 in Karazhan. But after tonight, I can assure you, I will be at the very least rank 3, maybe 2. And well, this video kinda wraps up Phase 1 for us. And I know this phase isn't everyone's favourite, but I've had so much fun. I think this first phase of TBC is better than all of the vanilla ones. And it's not just the raids or the dungeons or whatever, but the game feels way more balanced. Finally, the top of the damage meters aren't just warriors. Building raid groups aren't just about how many warriors can we cram into one raid. It feels like he who is good at his class can actually show off and excel. And of course, Phase 2 is right around the corner, and I cannot wait to share my journey with you. I hope you all enjoyed today's video because I enjoyed making it. Yes, I apologise for the slight delay in getting this video out. I have had one hell of a week. And as I was creating this video, I noticed that maybe cramming the attunement into the same video wasn't the greatest idea. It felt like I couldn't really build a proper flow. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed it anyway. As for content, I think I will make the last hunter leveling video where we finally hit level 70. I've also got another class which I started, so we will maybe shove that one in there as well. Plus I also plan on making a Druid TBC movie style video as well, so I hope you are looking forward to that. Anyway, I think that is enough yapping for today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.